of that nature?
Today we have the visit of Annette Michelson, one of the editors of October, a leading journal of art, theory, criticism, and politics.
Well, what I'd like to start with is the magazine that Annette Michelson is co-editor of October, which had its first issue in spring of 1976.
Yes.
And what I'd like to ask is just about the origin of the journal, the circumstances, perhaps, its goals, and its title.
Well, I know almost no writer who, at some time or other, does not want her or his own magazine. I'd always wanted mine, but it seemed rather utopian kind of venture. I had, however, been an editor, a contributing editor of Art Forum, a major art magazine, for 10 years. And in 1975-6, I left it, taking with me two friends and colleagues with me, with the intention of founding another magazine.
What were the circumstances of that leaving? I mean, was it a case of internal strife or something of that nature, or was it a kind of decision to move on or to create one's own vehicle in some more explicitly sort of ideological way?
Well, actually, there were certainly personal and psychological reasons within the magazine, which of course are trivial and of no importance or interest, I think, to anyone apart from myself. And so I don't think there's any point discussing those. But I had a particular function in the magazine. That is, I had come increasingly to see the range of artistic practice in this country, and most particularly in this city, as being increasingly fragmented and diversified. And I was, in a sense, concerned with just those aspects of critical and theoretical work which had to do with that dispersion. That is to say, which had to do with the relation between painting and sculpture, as we conventionally and traditionally know them, to other media and art forms, such as dance, performance, film, and video. And it had therefore become my role at the magazine, if you like, to take account of these and to present them as well as possible to an audience which I felt increasingly interested.
You're speaking now still in the situation.
This was at Art Forum. And what happened?
And you think that these things weren't being addressed by, in other words, you were taking on the responsibility of this.
They had not until that time, I think, been seriously considered and critically considered by any major art publication. It was therefore my intention to do so, and for a number of years I was able to do this for a number of reasons, partly having to do with the economy of the art world and the function of an art magazine in relation, let's say, to the network of buyers, galleries, and institutions. There seemed to be no longer a place for that. Or that is to say, the margin the margin that had been allotted to it was being consistently reduced by editorial policy, acting, I think, under a certain number of understandable constraints from the art market. I therefore left. And,
in other words, the possible options for critic were confined by the policies of the commercial policies of the magazine. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I was told in a word that my concerns were not, so to speak, concerns which had to do with the lifeblood of the magazine, and the lifeblood of an art magazine, as everybody knows, is the advertising supplied by major dealers. So I left, and in any case, I was interested in addressing not only a variety of concerns, critical, theoretical, but a somewhat larger, or if not larger, broader audience. That is to say, an audience which was not specifically that of artists, dealers, critics, and institutional functionaries, that composed the Audience of Art Forum. I was interested, if you like, in addressing people from other fields involved in other kinds of signifying practices and in other kinds of institutions as well. So I left and I founded with a friend and colleague, Rosalind Krauss, October. You asked about the title of the magazine.
Yes, but first I'd like to make it clear that this is very unlike what you'd now probably consider an art magazine in the ways, so that in founding this, you took account of the shortcomings, say, of what the constraints of being an editor at Art Forum were, and made something much more like an intellectual journal, if you like. Or
that's quite true, and that was our intention from the beginning.
There aren't any ads for galleries in it, are there?
No, there's practically no advertising of any kind, but the advertising that we do have comes largely from publishers, from other magazines, involves, as in any of these journals, a certain number of exchange ads, or sometimes from film distributors. But
what would you do with an ad from say, Sonnabend Gallery if they applied for it, if they wanted to pay you for it?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure that we would accept at this point. And I say this, with no particular sense of personal, aggressiveness to Liana. It's, I think we prefer to keep clear of the kind of relationship that entails.
You speak of autonomy then, and that presumably is the motive here. I mean, not to get ensnarled in any kinds of obligations, perhaps, or, well, there are various reasons why things turn up in art magazines to carry a load of advertising, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the title then. Now we have October. Now that means more to you than the name of a month, I assume.
Yes, October. And by the way, a great many people ask us about the title of the magazine and are somewhat puzzled by it. It was, by the way, explained in a kind of manifesto that we issued at the beginning of our first issue.
I know, I've read, but I'd like you to sort of give it back to people. Yeah.
Of course. To begin with, October is a date in human history. It is the date of the revolution known as the October Revolution in 1917. And we see it as a moment of history in which there is a particularly powerful, perhaps not simply powerful, but a uniquely privileged conjunction of political and aesthetic innovations. There's really a moment of transformation. And we wish to celebrate and honor that moment of transformation. Secondly, within that moment of transformation, that is to say the revolution of 1917, there was a movement known as October of the Arts, which was, if you like, a kind of recasting of the notion of modernism in the arts. And that is a tradition from which we do not wholly dissociate ourselves, though we have a somewhat critical position toward the kind of orthodoxy that has since developed around that notion.
I'm not sure I follow you now. Are you saying that...
That is to say that in the Soviet Union, at the very birth of the Soviet Union, the notion of October in the arts was consistent with a certain aesthetic recasting of the notion of a left, an innovative force in the arts. Thirdly, there's another factor which, if you like, not simply adds to all of these considerations, but if you like, over-determined our choice, and that is that I happen to be born on the 7th of November, and so that I celebrate, I celebrate that date every year. It is the date of the forming of the Soviet Union. So that's how the magazine came to be called October. Also, we made a vow, I'm not sure that we've kept it, that we would appear 4 times a year, but never in October.
Just to sort of
just to add to the puzzle,
yes, right.
Just a little bit.
Well, that would just clearly dissociate the title from just the calendar position.
Well, yes, because the October Revolution, of course, took place on November 7th.
So now in this manifesto that you have written in the first issue of this this magazine, there are some, I think, certainly provocative, and perhaps somewhat puzzling. I mean, you say, for example, not there, but just now that you are assuming a kind of critical relationship to the spirit of the Russian avant-garde around the time of the, well, say, in the decade following the revolution. Mm-hmm. And clearly, Eisenstein is one of the figures that figures largely in the opening numbers of the magazine, as well as in your own writing. I mean, do you want to do you want people to get the impression that there is a ideological bent in the very philosophy of October toward a kind of Marxist orientation?
Well, I think that that question that you pose points to what is undoubtedly the most problematic aspect of the magazine. And what I mean is the following. First of all, the magazine is now composed of a staff of several persons. With myself and Rosalind Krauss, we also have Douglas Crimp, who is our managing editor and a real force in the not only the production but the policy of the magazine, and Craig Owens, who joined us more recently. And I think when we formed the magazine, the composition of the board was very, very slightly different. And it, I think, was our hope that we could really celebrate that conjunction of, let's say, innovation in the arts and a certain kind of political consciousness and awareness.
Right. Well, no doubt these are
to be
issues that
defined
we're not,
as undoubtedly
yes.
oriented to the left.
Okay.
For myself, the issues of Marxist methodology are still alive and still extremely interesting. I cannot say that that view is shared equally by all members of the staff at present by any means. But I think that what has been important for me is that we have at all times tried, I think perhaps not wholly successfully, to confront issues involving innovation in the arts in terms of an actual, of a present historical and political conjuncture. That becomes more crucial and more manifest in certain, on certain issues and certain points of the magazine than others.
Do you see it partly as a kind of writing of the balance that was upset, say, in art criticism that preceded the kind of, I mean, without necessarily promoting a Marxist interpretation of film, say, or art in general. One does a service, I take it, to just the options for being an art critic by opening up the possibility of entirely new orientations, at least in the experience of American journalism with respect to art. Is that true or not?
I suppose that what you say is true. I would have to think
about that more.
Maybe we
have a false perspective on just how much formalism really does count.
Well,
it seems to count a lot to some people, and then there are others who have gone along quite well without having gotten somehow obsessed with its shortcomings. Say, I'm thinking of someone like Susan Sontag, for example. I mean, it strikes me as an exemplary critic, simply because there are no theoretical preoccupations beyond, say, making convictions apparent. Maybe I'm wrong about that, I don't know.
I'm not sure that what you've been saying is clear to me. And
well, let's put it this way. Would you say that at this point in the course of the magazine's existence, your role as a critic and your role as an editor converge in a certain way, so that there are certain points of view which are more virtuous than others as far as the writing that appears in the magazine?
First of all, I want to disclaim any sense of presenting a virtuous point of view. Okay. I have never conceived my work in terms of virtue or vice. Okay, but what I do want to say is that, for example, on very specific issues in which I feel positions are possible, I take positions which certainly can be interpreted as political, which involve political choices, which involve certain kinds of presuppositions which are political rather than, let us say, ethical or aesthetic. I'd also want to say, however, that in general, as I've indicated before, there's a way in which, for me, some 15 or 20 years ago, the encounter with the art that surrounded the events of 1917 was crucial.
So that changed your own conception of artistic
It certainly
practice.
did. It certainly did. And it was manifested, I think, probably in the first text that I published in this country after return from a very long period of living abroad. It was called Film and the Radical Aspiration. It's also the first text on film that I published in English.
Well, before that, you were publishing in French.
I was publishing in English and in French on art because I was living in Paris for a very long time.
And you were then what, a film critic at that point?
No, I was an art critic.
So you were looking primarily at painting?
There was a time when I was an accredited member of the, if not the art establishment, let's say that lowly order of beings known as art critics.
The type that put reviews into the magazines and newspapers.
Yes, I was very simply the art editor of the New York Herald Tribune in Paris and Paris correspondent for Arts Magazine at a time when Hilton Kramer was its editor.
Now, do you look back upon this experience of the Russian art as a kind of conversion?
No.
Or as a kind of unveiling of verities about art that one might...
No. What it was, first of all, the revelation of an extraordinary historical moment, and a moment which it seemed to me had things to reveal and to teach us. It opened, I saw it not as a conversion to virtue or away from vice, but I saw it as opening up an enormous set of possibilities that involved, by the way, critical and theoretical practice, as well as precedents for work in film, sculpture, architecture, typography, etc.
Well, leaving virtue aside, I mean, one doesn't write criticism without a partisan point of view, right? I mean, if you write an article that's entitled Film and Radical Aspiration, is that what you said?
Yes.
I mean, presumably there's something about that radical aspiration that is exemplary. I mean, the word exemplary occurs in the manifesto here. If you like to call it that, it may be or in scare quotes, but nevertheless, it is a statement of, a passionate statement, I would say.
Yes, it is.
And it seems to announce a kind of standard of judgment. No, perhaps.
I don't know whether it announces. I don't think it announces a standard of judgment. I don't think that this magazine is about setting standards for judgment, but I do think that it is partly about developing ways, methods of understanding and critical analysis for a number of seemingly very disparate, related
And do you think, do you see this in connection with the consideration of arts in a larger spectrum than, say, piecemeal? I mean, this was the implication, I think, that you wanted to provide a context in which, say, painting and sculpture could be seen as interrelated, dance and theater, film, and so forth. And perhaps also in the light of these more theoretical materials, which then get fed into the discussion. I'm thinking, for example, of some of the French linguistic studies that seem to crop up, the kind of affiliation with French or even perhaps Russian theoretical orientations.
Yes, we've been very concerned with making use of some of the theoretical options which now lie open to us, and which have their origins and work done quite far back in the century. Again, very often by the Russians, or somewhat later, of course, by the French. We're interested in that. However, in several of our issues, we have paid a great deal of attention, let's say, to the interrelationships between choreography and sculpture, between dance and film. We're interested in the way in which what Rosalind, I think, is called the field, in a sense, of contemporary arts seems to be not only expanding, but developing a whole network of interrelationships of a complexity, which I think did not obtain, or at least it had not yet flowered, let's say, in the period of the 1950s. I mean, if you look back at the 1950s, if you're an art critic, it's almost monolithic. Abstract expressionism and painting dominates, absolutely dominates the field, with obviously other things going on, but somewhat obscured by that extraordinary phenomenon which was the flowering generation of Pollock and de Kooning. In the present time, we cannot point to anything like that dominant kind of cultural practice, but we do have a number of extremely significant and interrelated ones.
So that the tendency is more to be expansive, in other words, than to be prescribing an attitude or a posture toward art practice, art making, art criticism.
I suppose so. To be certainly receptive and to be serious.
But there are presumably then new kinds of questions and new kinds of critical efforts that you're particularly interested in collecting under the covers of this magazine.
Well, I'll tell you what we're interested in collecting.
Yeah.
I mean, among the things that we're interested in collecting, and this, by the way, comes out of our experience at Art Forum magazine. One thing that we've been very interested in having, and very pleased at having come into us, flow into us, as it were, is a certain amount of documentation of artistic practice, apart from the critical and theoretical work, which involves, essays on sculpture, film, choreography, whatever. We have been very pleased to see that many filmmakers of the independent persuasion are offering us their scripts for publication, therefore published scripts by Yvonne Rayner. We'll be publishing script by James Benning, by Hollis Frampton. We have we were very aware of the fact that one of the signal services of Art Forum, and Art Forum performed many services in its heyday, was the direct documentation of artistic practice, particularly in the late 1960s, when a great many of the artists were writing. And we feel that Art Forum has been stimulating, that October has been stimulating artists to produce texts as well. And so we have welcomed those texts.
Well, I think that generally, in my own experience, reading things that artists write is very instructive. I mean, one tends to have to rebalance a little bit, I think, in reinterpreting the work somehow, or just being careful not to let the work become infected by the rhetoric of the talk. But nevertheless, those documents are extremely useful and
we've also
extremely like contributions to aesthetics, which perhaps have more potential use to critics than other critical writing per se.
We've also published what seem to us important documents from the past. That is to say, in our second issue, we published what I think is one of the really important documents in the history of film, and we're very proud to publish it. And it was Eisenstein's journal entries for his project Film of Capital. In a forthcoming issue, we'll be publishing the diary entries of Maya Deren at a time when she was contemplating making film in Haiti and working on footage from Bali, which had been given to her by Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson. And it becomes the occasion for a kind of meditation on the relation of, let's say, film aesthetic to ethnology. Documents like these from the past we're very selective about, but when we feel that they're very important and that they have an actual kind of present interest, we publish them too.
Now they're of a piece in a way with the general sort of feel for things in the magazine. In other words, I take it you wouldn't be so interested in a script of say, one of the commercial filmmakers in the early days of Hollywood as much, for example, or would you?
Probably not, but I mean, that probably not, no.
Yeah.
We also feel that we have a kind of, we have a kind of role to perform in publishing work which cannot be made available elsewhere. And there are plenty of reprint houses, you know, that publish Hollywood film scripts. There is no reprint house. I mean, we are a forum for people who do not have a forum, who must have a forum, we feel.
So it's a kind of partisan, it's a championing in a way of things that you think are worth knowing about, that are valuable, that are simply important, work that needs to be more widely known about and perhaps studied more carefully.
Yes, I mean, you know, if Stanley Kubrick were to offer us a text he had written or an interview, I, as many of my readers know, who I'm extremely interested in Kubrick, would probably jump the idea, but that's not likely to happen. We are not, we do not address the kind of audience, how shall I put it? We do not serve that unique function for the industry that we can serve for those who are outside the industry. And that seems to me obvious.
Well, they get their share, that's for sure.
Tune in next week for another SoHo TV program. My name is Jaime Davidovich, executive producer. Ciao.
Hi, I would like to invite you to be a friend of SoHo TV and offer to you our own publication, TV Magazine. TV has articles about our programs, commentaries, and video pieces by contemporary artists. We want to send you this magazine in this pin, a reminder that TV is not bad after all. We're a nonprofit organization and need your help in continuing our programs. Send us your tax-deductible contribution of $10 or more and receive free our magazine and TV pin. Join us as a friend.